And some of that stuff like only comes from experience, unfortunately, fortunately. So that's why we're wanting to be here and like share those things.
Okay, so we have our very much highly requested episode, which is workflow at events. So there are lots and lots of factors that contribute to this. There are slow-paced events, there are very high volume events, and there are three things that we think are like kind of the major factors in what's going to affect like the things you do and how you do it, which is the amount of time that is allotted for you as the artist to be at the event and provide like the activation itself, right? Like the art, the activation. And so typically, I don't know about you, Kat, but like I feel like I typically get hired for like 3 to 5 hours.
Yeah, I would say on like most events, I would say are between like 3 and 4 hours with a handful that extend into 5 to 6 on like more popular
Yeah.
dates and things like that, or like weddings tend to be a little bit longer. But yeah, I would say we're typically between like that 3 to 6 hour range. I have had a handful, I would like more than just a few. Like I've definitely had a handful that were 2 hours, just because that's all that was either needed or that's all that fit, or like maybe it was like a workshop or something like that, that I was like doing like some gifting for or whatever. But yeah, most of them 3 to 6 hours, I would say, or not. Yeah, within the range of 3 to 6 hours.
Yeah, same. I weirdly have like a 10-hour one coming up, and I already know I'm gonna hate myself. No, I your face right now. It's like a full
Oh
day.
my
It is
god,
8 to 6, and I'm like, what did I get myself into? I don't know.
best
I
of
don't
luck
always
to
think
you.
these things through, but here we are. Anyways, that goes to our next thing, which is the number of guests, which is also a really big factor.
Hmm.
And of course, which hopefully this is self-explanatory, but like the service that you're offering. So whether
Yes.
so engraving like is much quicker than, for instance, like painting on a leather journal or something, right? Like taking a brush,
Right.
sticking it in paint, and then doing the brush strokes, right? Is very different than
Right.
engraving.
Or damn near anything is faster than foiling,
Oh my gosh.
in my opinion.
Yeah, foiling's an interesting one. That has its own fun factors. But yeah, so if you're like doing fashion illustration and you're just doing the face versus whether you're doing the face and the whole body and you're doing like intricate things about the people's clothes and accessories and things like that versus if you're like embroidering just like a line drawing versus are you filling the whole thing in, like there's so many things that
Right.
are impact what you're doing. But yeah, like I think the amount of time that's allotted, the number of guests that you have at the event, which is kind of hard to tell whether it's like a retail event. I think that's one of those things where it's like if you're at like Nordstrom's or Bloomingdale's, like is it one of those weekends that's going to be super busy? Is it one of those weekends that they're just trying to get people in the store and that's why they're having the event, right? So you can't really anticipate a lot of people that are going to be walking, like a lot of foot traffic.
Right. I think that kind of ties in. So, like, number of guests, if they already know if it's like a private event or something like that, that's a little bit more straightforward. But if it is something that's maybe more of like a retail event or something along those lines, I think the kind of additional thing you would want to consider is like, what is the guest's access to that item, or
Mm.
like the client's access to that item? So, for example, like in retail, I would say most times it's not just like anybody can walk up and get it. It's typically like a gift with purchase kind of setup. So, because they have to purchase something, that typically slows it down more so than if just anybody could walk up, regardless of if they made a purchase or not, and then just like walk away
Yeah.
with the thing. So, you might still be jam packed busy. Again, if it's like a crazy busy weekend, or sometimes people see you're there and they're like, I'm gonna buy like 9 things and have you do all of them. So it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be a slow event at retail. It just means that it's not like free access
Yeah.
like there is something required of the guest or the client or the customer, whatever else, to
Yeah.
access your service.
As opposed to like a whiskey festival where the ones that we've done where they're literally handed a rocks glass and they literally bring it immediately to get engraved and it's free. It's like, well, not
Yeah.
free, it's like part of their ticket, right? So very different. That line is always very long, and which kind of is also another thing that I think leads into the next thing, which is, what are you offering? That is when I limit my word count. So that's a conversation that you have with the client where you're like, okay, if there's going to be this many people and I'm only there for this many hours, kind of like knowing how many can you actually do within an hour given whatever medium that you're doing, right?
Right. And I would say that's kind of something that is going to depend like artist to artist. I think everybody we've talked to has had way different numbers for like engraving, for example, of how many they can do per hour. So I think, if you're maybe newer to this and you don't already have that number in your head about what that looks like and how to modify that, a way that you could come up with that number. I've heard in the past, like do one, in your studio or at home or, wherever you're practicing. Um, I personally don't feel like just doing one is enough.
Of course you don't.
I personally think you should try like practice doing multiple like you would be on site. I think that gives, not that just doing one is wrong. I just think you get a more realistic estimate when you're trying to do a couple different things back to back. So again, if you are engraving, for example, engrave like 3 or 4 different items if you have it available, or if you're doing fashion illustration, do 3 or 4 different drawings back to back. So you get a general idea of maybe how long that's taking you for each one, maybe mix up the style a little bit. So then you're able to kind of see, okay, something more detailed takes this long versus something more simple takes this long. So then you're able to kind of generate, this is about how long it takes me to do each item. And then I would take that time and then I would multiply that by like time and a half, or even like double that for on site. So, for example, if I engrave something and it took me 30 seconds to make that finalized and presentable where the client could walk away with it, I would recommend accounting like 45 seconds to a full minute per item on site, just because the whole point of why we're live event artists is typically we are there to do some type of like entertainment or interaction. So you want to account for that time where you might need to explain what it is that you're doing there, to have that time and space for the like reaction when they get it, like, oh my gosh, that's amazing, or whatever else, right? We don't want to just be like, okay, thanks, bye, like shoving them away, right? So all of that takes time. So that is where it kind of differs versus like in studio on site. So yeah, I would a lot like if you're trying to figure that out, like time and a half or double time when you're trying to figure your best estimate out.
Okay, sidebar, like please tell me why this, when you were describing that, it took me back to like childhood, like playing like teacher or like some sort of thing like in your little playroom.
Why?
I don't know. I was just like picturing doing it at home and like having your little setup and then like having like if you have kids or like pets or like I don't know, roommates, but and like them coming up to you, handing you a glass or like whatever they want and having that interaction. I don't know why. For some reason my brain was like
Just like imaginary
yeah,
play.
like if just cosplay at home, it's fine.
Amazing. I love that.
So if you're cosplaying then another thing to do is kind of like make sure that if you are doing your whole little setup at home, which is actually something I did like, and I'm sure other artists have done before, like if they do any sort of like vending situation. So like if you have products and you're bringing it to a market, you kind of like do your little setup at home right before you go to the actual event. You can kind of do the same thing with events, right? So get your sign out, make a little sign that says what you're doing, have your order forms, um, and have your whole like, how would you set it up? Like, do that whole thing, right? So that you make sure that A, it looks nice, and B, like, you remember, kind of prep yourself for the event, making sure that you have everything that you need.
Yeah, and like things are accessible. Like if you're left-handed, like not putting your item on your right side where you're having to like constantly reach over your body, or, again, like if you are right-handed, for example, putting any like pens that you need, like easily
Oh my
accessible. So you're
gosh.
not, again, like crossing over, just like not being as efficient as you
The
could
amount
be.
of times I've put my paint like so far away from me, and then I say to myself, I'm like, oh my God. And then I move my paint like so much closer to the item. Because sometimes like you don't even want to put it close to the item because you're like, I don't even want to like, I don't want paint to spill. Like I don't want to accidentally
Yeah.
whatever. But gosh, that makes such a difference. It really does.
Yes.
It
I do want to go back something else that you had said
The signage.
about, yeah, the
Mm.
signage. So I feel like that is definitely something that could be helpful, is just like having some promotional signage or like informational signage about what it is that you're doing to help limit some of that back and forth. You can use it kind of to supplement the very brief description that you might be giving somebody. Sometimes I would say for me, it's probably been 50-50, even for private events. Um, that you're like whoever's hiring you might already be developing their own marketing signage or like their own promotional signage that has that. So that's just something that you might want to ask. If not, I think just having kind of like a generic
Yeah.
signage that's just like explaining what you're doing, like calligraphy, customization, hand engraving, or whatever it is that you're doing, is something that can help
Yeah.
with
I think it's
questions.
always best to assume that people don't know what you're doing, right? So like assume that they've never
Yes.
seen what you've ever done before, and like how would you educate them, right? Like how do you make it accessible for them to interact with you, and how do you make it accessible for them to understand what the hell you're doing? Because it just kind of like it takes the guesswork out of it, and I think that also like makes people feel a little bit more knowledgeable, as opposed to when people walk up. Although I will say, even if you have a sign, sometimes people walk up and be like, what are you doing here, as they like see you literally like engraving a fragrance, like so anyways, it's really important, I think, just to kind of like tell people in an easy way with a sign that says like on-site fashion illustration, or um, portrait painting, something where people know exactly what it is. Also, like saying it's complimentary versus not. For our services, me and Kat, we don't do things that aren't complimentary to guests. Um, so if you are
Meaning that our client is paying us for our time. We are not charging per item we do
correct, yes. So
on the
like writing
signage.
complimentary, that's something that you can also add if you seem to be getting those questions a lot. But obviously it like depends on the type of event. So like if you're doing a VIP or influencer thing, like those people usually know that they're not going to have to pay for whatever like activations are happening at an event, as opposed to like if you were doing like ornaments at a craft fair, you might, and like someone paid you to be there, that might be a little bit different, right? So yeah,
Yeah.
just making it like easy for people, as well as like order forms. I don't know about y'all, but someone can tell me their name like 6 times in a row and I'm still going to be like, how do you spell that? Please spell that again. Please double check.
Yeah.
So making sure that someone can like have a place to write something down, and you can be as basic or as extra as you want with this. I'm pretty basic, just having blank paper for people. But I know a lot of things also for like VIP events. Like when I did something with Netflix, I had like a very personalized order form for people to fill out,
Yeah.
just because it was more elevated event. So I think it kind of just depends on the
It just
event.
depends on your
Yeah, also your
preference.
preference.
I would say a lot of people use post-it notes just because you don't need a whole lot of space, and that way you're not like using a bunch of paper. I would say post-it notes are pretty
And then you can
common.
stick it on the item when
I'm
you're done
extra
sometimes
is
too.
Yeah, I'm extra as fuck, so I make custom post-it items
Wait,
that also have directions in my branding on it. Did I not
you
tell you
did
this?
not. I have not seen these yet. I am looking forward to seeing them.
Custom post-it notes that have all the things, and that way, like when things are laid out too, they like look way better because it's all like nice and uniform.
Oh my gosh. All
Um,
right, well,
So yeah, slide into my DMs if you want to figure that
Oh my
out.
gosh, I'm like, you're gonna have to build out a template for that. We're gonna have to do a little download. I love that.
But yeah, so either that or even I know you and I have done like a form on a clipboard
Oh
before when
yeah.
just like post-it notes start getting
Yeah.
crazy, or if it's like outside and post-it notes aren't like strong enough to like
Yeah.
stay
Or
attached to the
like
item.
when people will act like goddamn kindergartners and like cut in front of each other and be like, "Excuse me, can I have this thing?" And you're like, you'll be, I've literally been at events where people will like push their post-it in front of the other post-its or like something like that. So that's also having some sort of like clipboard with a form where it's like in order can also like kind of really help
Yeah.
mitigate that for when people do those sort of things. Because yeah, then you have like an order and you're like, no, I clearly have like this other person first, right?
Right.
So, has that not happened to you?
Yeah, I feel like yes, and it's like very wild to me. Nothing makes people more feral than free things.
Yeah.
But like
Okay, same. Yeah. That's what I'm
I
saying.
feel like too when I'm looking at post-it notes, like if it's a really, really, really high volume event, I have a hard time judging how many post-it notes I have sitting in front of me. So if people are asking me if it's not something that they're necessarily like having to stand there and wait and it's something that they could pick up at the end of an event, or maybe they want to stand there and they want to watch their item being done, I just have a really hard time having a frame of reference of like this fucking crazy stack of post-it notes is like 30 post-its for me to then do the math to be like, oh, I'm not going to get to yours for another like 20 minutes if you want to come back. So sometimes the like form on the clipboard is a little bit easier because then I can literally see the numbers and be like, hey, and it just sounds better. I feel like I can be like, hey, I have 15 people in front of you.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I can give more of a concrete answer as opposed to like, sorry, I have this like ginormo crazy pile of post-it
Yeah.
notes. I'm not even confident where yours is
Yeah.
at in
Oh,
here. Like,
100%. Uh,
so sometimes I do like post-its. I think they serve a purpose, but not to overshadow an actual like form on a
yeah.
clipboard.
Okay, and then like something else to provide on your order form, I think is also like you can note like the word count. So some events, depending on the amount of guests, depending on what you're doing, you can kind of like limit what you are doing. And that's something that I do when I'm educating my clients. I'm like, if you want everyone to have like free for all, they can have a full sentence on their glass, then great, you're going to need this many artists and this
Right.
many hours and all the things, right? But if you want to make sure, like, and that's like if you want every single person to get a customization. However, if there's like 6 other activations happening at the same time, you might only have like a few people and then you don't really need to limit it. Versus also when you
Right.
can just limit it to like 1 to 2 words or a monogram or initials or something like that. So that's also
Yeah.
some things that you can do to educate your client for like how much you can realistically do within a certain time period.
I do think limiting the word count and or providing a suggestion for what the customization is. So again, like monogram, date, first name, first and last name, or whatever. I would say a lot of my workflow is impacted by a very uncontrollable variable, which is people standing there trying to figure out what they want customized. Nothing takes longer in my workflow than someone standing there trying to be creative because they just don't want to write their name.
Yes. I
Because then they have no frame of reference for anything else that they might want on it
mm-hmm.
at the time. And that's where I'm usually like starting to generate examples. So sometimes already having those suggestions up front, in addition to a word count, just sometimes people do need to be put in the box a little bit. I know the whole point of customizations is like we can do anything, which is great. For people that aren't going to take 5 minutes to figure out what that is. Some people like walk up and they're like, I immediately know like this very out of pocket thing that I want you to do. I do think that is a way, again, like giving people examples and like a word count to help cut down the amount of time that people are taking to figure out what it is that they want.
Yeah. And just note that even if you do give people a word count, sometimes they'll still go over that. So that's really fun. That actually happened to me recently at an event. And it was like we were packing up and this guy comes over and he's like, "Can you just do these 2 more?" And I was like, "Absolutely. If you can keep them to 2 to 3 words, I can do those super quick for you." This man has the audacity to write like 6 words each. And I was like,
a haiku.
Literally, I was
a
like,
simple
"Sir."
haiku.
He's like, "What? I was like, "Oh my gosh, I cannot." Like, I still did it, but I was like, "Sir," and I kind of gave him shit for it. I was like, in a fun way. And I was like, "Sir, this was more than what I said you could do. I just want you to know."
I have not held my boundary, but I'm letting you know you've crossed it.
Exactly. I'm like, it's easier, honestly, to just have like done it than to have like gone back and forth with like edit.
Yeah, than to wait for him to come up with something different.
I was like, this man has, I think he had been like a few drinks in, and I was like, there's no way that he is going to come up with a 3-word or less thing.
Yeah.
So it was much easier. But
yes.
So just pro tip that people might push your boundaries. And it is sometimes up to you to hold fast and true to those boundaries that you set. And that's something where you can be the one who does that. You can, depending on the event, sometimes there will be like a brand rep or like an artist assistant on site. If you're really lucky, you can hire your own assistant to be on site to help you. Sometimes you can utilize your partner for free labor or some family members. So yeah, I think that's something where that can also help mitigate some of those event flow things, is having someone to talk to customers. However, again, that is usually an added cost, whether it's somebody's time or if you are actually paying someone and not just utilizing free labor. Because you can't bring your partner or your roommate or your sibling to every event, right?
Another example too, before we move on, I feel like for kind of like similar to word count, maybe, I don't know, I don't do these things, but I know a lot of people that do fashion illustration or like watercolor portraits to help with like workflow
or
will
like bottle painting.
Work not from, like portrait people, like they'll take a photo on their phone of the person, so that way that person doesn't have to like sit there for you to kind of like do the portrait of them. So that way they can, again, if it's retail, maybe they can go continue shopping, while they're working from the photo on their phone, or if it's like an event that they're able to go and mingle and have drinks or, whatever it is that they're doing, have a little snacky snack and then like come back to the item being done. So I know that is something that a lot of live artists, like portrait artists, will do. To kind of help with workflow.
That's a good tip too. And that's actually something I've done as well. When I've gotten it so many times, I don't know why. But like someone wants me to copy like either their tattoo design or like a very specific thing they saw on like Instagram or Pinterest. And I'll be like, yeah, so I'll like take my phone out, take a picture of take a picture of their picture, right? So that they can go like do the thing and work on that for them. So I think those are pretty much the main things that I think could really impact your workflow. Again, do some cosplaying at home, do some imaginary play, figure out what you could do. And then, that can kind of give you like gauge how to educate your client on those things as well. And sometimes, listen, like you're not going to know all the information before you go into your event. There's many events that I walked into where the expectations have changed. So I think that's good to note as well, that a huge part of being an event artist is being flexible with that change, and or setting that boundary and communicating with whoever you need to communicate to make sure that it's kind of like a good compromise. So yeah, I think whether you are engraving, painting, foiling, doing pointed pen, there's lots of things that you can do to kind of help you with your workflow as well. Early on, it would take me a really long time to do anything because I would sketch out every single thing. I would draw lines. I would use tape. I would literally write out the entire like word, and then I would engrave over that, and then I would engrave over it and do the downstrokes and do every little thing. And I think it took me like 10 minutes, like per whatever bottle that I was doing, whether it was like a fragrance bottle or whatever. And to put that in perspective, I could probably do like 10 in 10 minutes at this point,
Yeah.
probably more. But yeah, it took a really long time initially because I was taking the time to do all of that. Kat, I don't know if you had like the same experience.
I did. I wasn't necessarily doing like but like I would definitely do like some type of like a drafting or like a sketch of
Mm-hmm.
some sort. I love the look of like filling in a downstroke.
Mm-hmm.
So that had like a chokehold on me for a very long time,
Same.
but it just like didn't work for certain things. And that's not to say you can't do those things, because I don't want it to seem like we're saying that's bad. Like you can't do
Yeah.
that, because that's not the case
But
at
like
all.
realistically, it's going to
I
impact.
It's just something to, yeah, it's something to consider in terms of your workflow. If you're able to kind of like draft it super quick, like because you just kind of need a, you want to make sure it's centered, or you want to make sure your flourishes are balanced or whatever else, and that's just kind of like a quick thing you're able to do. No harm, no foul. But again, if it is moving into now we're like 5-10 minutes and it is not a slower pace event, it is a fast paced event, like
People are waiting.
that, I people are waiting. One, they're losing interest, but also I do think because live event artistry is growing, and it might not be the same in your area. I think it is maybe specific to our experience in like Southern California. um, I do think our clients have an expectation of about how long something should
Mm-hmm.
take, and that can be something that would make them consider hiring somebody else next time if you are not kind of like quick enough to keep up with the event. So again, no harm, no foul. It just might not be, depending on where you're at in your experience, if that's something you're needing to do for each one, or whatever else, that just might not be the right event for you, which is something we've talked about
Yeah.
in a previous
And I would,
episode. So that is something that you're going to want to do some reflection on and kind of identify your readiness, for maybe some of the higher volume
yeah.
events.
And without like losing the quality of it too, right? Like
Yeah.
obviously everyone could go super freaking fast, but you have to be able to do it without losing that quality of your work.
Yeah. If that's like looking
Yeah.
shaky and like
I remember,
off center.
yeah, I remember getting that like as a compliment, and I was like, oh yeah, like I didn't really like think about that, of someone being like, wow, like I've only ever seen engraving and it kind of looks like, yeah, like that shaky, like that line where it's like not smooth. Um, and this again was in the beginning, but that was like, yeah, because I went over it like 7,000 times so that it would look smooth.
No, super heavy and like carving it like a
I
caveman.
do listen. I do have a very heavy hand, so I am actually.
You are
I
very
am
heavy
very heavy.
handed.
I'm heavy-handed. I'm heavy-footed. I'm just. I don't know. Really fucking aggressive, I guess. But yeah, but yeah. So I think like adding those downstrokes is something to consider. It also, I was like, it just looks so much better. But I think a lot of it was because I wasn't practicing having a good style with a monoline look. So that's where you're not adding those downstrokes and all your lines are looking the same. And it wasn't until I practiced monoline a lot where I was like, oh, wait, no, this is actually, I like this a lot better.
And in my experience, I don't know, like, I don't know if this is wrong or not, but in my experience, like, there is a noticeable difference when you're engraving and you have like a lighter hand versus a heavier hand. It's obviously not as like notable as when you're doing like pointed
Mm-hmm.
pen, and the ink is doing the different things on like the thicks and the thins and the upstrokes and the downstrokes or whatever. But there is like a contrast that you are able to do if you're varying pressure, if that's something that you're comfortable with, like because you've done some engraving and stuff like that and you're a little bit more experienced in that way. Like there is a way to have some variation that reflects similarly to something like that. So you're not having to fill in the downstrokes as much or whatever else. So that is something I have come across.
That's a good point, though.
Mostly on accident.
Mostly on accident.
Mostly because my hand was getting tired.
Oh, Lordy. That's so funny.
Happy little accident.
Happy little accident. Also, again, I know that there's more people than calligraphers listening to this. However, I do feel like it's really important to note also that I would say 9.9 out of 10 times at events do not offer rub and buff. This is because, so this is when you're kind of like doing that like gold or silver inlay. You're
like the fill.
Sorry, yes. Yeah. The fill.
The color
fill
for engraving.
And there's another thing that's not rub and buff. I feel like you just bought some.
The gilding wax?
Gilding wax. Thank you. Pro tip, if you hate rub and buff like the rest of us, there's also gilding wax. I haven't tried it yet. Have you tried it?
Nope. I just have a bunch of it sitting in my bag.
Amazing. We love that.
I literally don't use color fill. I think it's mostly because my volume, like my high volume events just like don't.
Yeah, there's no way.
Time for that for me.
There's no way.
But I've recently been doing, and I know you do a lot of drinkware or like glassware, and obviously that's not food safe. So a lot of times I'm not always engraving things that are able to have color fill. So I'm really mostly only using that for like
fragrances,
retail perfume engraving. Yeah, I just haven't done a lot of candles that recently. So
yeah, same.
Because even I don't know that I would put it on a lipstick even.
Oh my god, no.
I might, depending on the cosmetic. Like, I don't
think I would.
I don't know. Depends. Probably not. I usually don't either unless someone like specifically asks.
Yeah. And I've seen people use like permanent marker or like some sort of paint marker as well. I don't feel like it looks great to like fill in with that either.
There are definitely I think you can make it look really good, like with the like acrylic paint fill.
If you have
that also just takes
I was
gonna
say if you
time.
have the time.
Like, I truly half the time I like it's tough for me to even do like a second pass of something because I'm like I gotta fucking hit this line correctly, like, and I want to nail it. I want it to look right, and that takes me too long. I could do it. I just
too much time.
Don't always want to sit there and like I'm already like so close to it, and then I have to like even closer to try to figure it out. So
wild child.
It is something you can offer. It is not something I necessarily like openly share that I'm doing.
I would also say, that's not something I even like share with my clients because it's like, also I have this other thing that I can do, but it's like the only time you would even offer it is if you can get an assistant or someone to be helping with that sort of thing, or like depending on the product, because I just feel like that shit takes way too long. Yeah. So,
and I think it is gorgeous. Don't get me wrong. Like I love me a gold fill, but it also like, especially at a high volume event, just like gets so messy. It gets fucking everywhere. The Ashley Benson fragrance event I did, I don't know what I was thinking. I lost my damn mind, but I did the first one with Phil. So then they all had to have Phil after that. And so fast, even though it was like a private event, like I ripped through not ripped through, that's like a bad way of phrasing it, but like I just worked through so many of these bottles. I have a photo of it actually. I just like can't share it because I was like very recently postpartum, and it's just like all chest in the photo. But there's a photo of my workstation and my hands are covered in it. Like my entire workstation is just like covered in rub and buff. There's like Q-tips and paint, like brushes and microfiber rounds and like it's just fucking everywhere. And it was so messy. And they didn't care. Like they were fine. Like they just like really liked how they were turning out. But I felt so stressed out because it was also like so dark. And I even brought my own light, and it's like still not enough. And I like couldn't see to make sure it was like all wiped off and like clean surface and all of that. It was like, somebody complained after. Everyone was fucking pumped about it, but it was a nightmare. And I feel like that was maybe my turning point. That I was like, okay, I am not offering it unless people ask, because This got crazy.
Yeah, and it's definitely one of those things where once one person sees it, it's like espresso martinis. It's like they see it and they smell it and they're like, that seems like something I want.
Especially if they find out you have like more than one color. Like if someone like everyone sees you have gold and then they're like, well, do you have silver? Or like someone's like, oh, do you have rose gold? And I'm like, yes, I do, but I don't want to take it out of my bag.
100%.
Just kidding. That is my internal
Yeah.
thought, but my outward behavior is, oh my gosh, yes.
Yeah.
Let me get it for
But
you.
I'm sure it's like the same thing for like, okay, again, not everyone's a calligrapher who's listening to this, but I'm sure it's the same thing for like painting and stuff like that. It's like, no, I'm not adding these other things. Like, don't even offer it as an option. Because I know, like, for instance, you could do water.
No, I'm not adding this other
Yeah.
color that's not on my palette, and I don't already have a brush for.
Exactly. Or like, you know how sometimes you can do like watercolor and then like the top of it is like those black lines to kind of outline, like that sort of thing, right? Like it could be like two different styles that you offer the client or something like that.
Yeah, like a multimedia.
Yeah. But again, yeah, like accounting for drying time. Like there's times where I'm like, okay, well, you have to kind of like pick this up later.
Yeah.
And that's also something that you.
Or even like pointed pen, like for like Mother's Day cards and things like that. Like they're like, how long is this going to take to dry? I'm like,
TBD.
I don't know, it could be like up to 10 minutes, dude. Like, just don't put it in the envelope.
Yeah. I'm always like, just hold it, maybe, please. Don't do anything with it. Yeah.
Especially if they're like standing there, I feel like could impact your time. If it's something that you're able to kind of like, and this kind of goes for anything, right? Like, if it isn't necessarily like a retail where they're like, I gotta walk out of here with my stuff, like, I always ask for some way to kind of like display the items out. So I also don't have to take time like hoarding all of the items that are done behind me. And then I'm managing new people coming up to me. And then like the people that have already finished being like, hi, where's my thing? And I have to like, I have a pretty good memory. So I can remember like, oh, you are this bottle. Here you go. Or like whatever else. But again, that like that Ashley Benson event, like we've also packaged all of them, which like that's another thing. Ask them if they're expecting you to package things and be like, hi, yes, I need an assistant.
And if it's packaged, it needs to have some sort of person's name with it, because if you fully put it in the package.
Yeah. So then I like had my post-it notes and I was like packaging these things, but then like all the bags looked the same and I like couldn't see. So then like people were coming up to me being like, and I was like, okay, yes, like your bag is like kind of over here. Like,
yeah, that's so tricky. I would say like,
and there wasn't a way to it. They were just like on the floor behind me. So I was like, ah.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Yeah, that sounds like chaos and would definitely stress me out. I was going to say though, like going back like a minute ago, you were talking about the dry time thing, and this is very dependent on the brand and the event. So for instance, like if you're inside, I don't usually recommend this, like unless you're inside and there's a lot of noise that would cancel it out. I have sometimes, like for instance, when I did June Shine, like denim painting, I thankfully solicited my family and partner to help me dry things. But like I brought a hair dryer and like the little like embossing dryer thing too.
Oh,
because it's like,
yeah, the embossing dryer is it.
Because I was literally painting on people's like butts like while they were standing there. So I'm like, well, now you can't sit down for the night.
I did not realize they were like wearing them.
Not everyone. Like, okay, well, like some people knew the assignment and they brought denim items, and then some people were just like there for the event. They didn't know, and they were like, well, can you paint the jeans that I'm wearing right now? And I'm like, yeah, why not?
Like, let me.
Yeah, literally. So I was like, well, I'm just gonna stand here and dry your butt pocket. But it was an outdoor event, and there's like a DJ, so like it's not like you just hear the dryer, right? Like I wouldn't be taking that shit into Prada. Like, excuse me, please hold everyone while I dry this real fast, you know.
I'm dead.
But like that, it can make a difference when you're like trying to cut down on dry time too, to just have a little dryer.
No, totally.
But yeah, like don't bring that into like your luxury client places.
Yeah, like know your audience for sure.
Oh my gosh. Okay, well, those are the only things that I can think of off the top of my head. by the top of my head, I mean our list of notes that we wrote down.
LOL. We like did not even reference.
So yeah, I think those are like some things that we would recommend, which was a whole lot, and it was all integrated in between a bunch of other things sandwiched in. So if there are still some questions, definitely like let us know. We're here to help. But I feel like, you know, we kind of covered a lot between like what to expect, how to educate your client, like knowing, doing some cosplay, some imaginary play, some practicing at home, and like some other factors that could kind of cut down on your time for when you're on site in an event and trying to get through things fast. Or just be more efficient, because not everything's about being fast. It's just like kind of working on your efficiency so that you don't have like 700 steps for every single item that you have to do, you know?
Yeah. Or you don't feel chaotic as fuck like I did.
Yeah, it definitely like helps your zen when like you have a process down. Like it's definitely helpful. So yeah, and it takes practice.
Start off on a better note than we did.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what we're here for. So yeah, if you have any other questions or even like any tips that you are on site and you're like, oh wow, this is like something that I do that could be really great for people to know, like we are so happy to share that publicly, or you know, if you even just want to give back to the community in some sort of way, definitely let us know.
Yeah, do that.
Yeah.
How should they let us know, Alex?
I know. I forgot my notebook, so I don't have the little thing. So
It's okay. If you have any feedback or anything like that, if you aren't already following us, you can find us on Instagram. We are at Keeping Up with the Calligs. So follow us, DM us any of your feedback, your questions, your stories, all of the things there. If you want to find us each individually for whatever reason, you can find me. I am Kat. No, that is my name, but my Instagram handle is at Kat Lauren Calligraphy. That is Kat with a C. And Alex, what is your handle?
My handle is Signs of Our Lives on Instagram. And I did want to note, definitely follow our Instagram. But if you're still at this point right now where you're like, okay, I already follow all 3 accounts, but maybe you haven't left a review, now's a great time to do that. Click that 5-star button, write love this podcast or your favorite thing that you've learned, or literally anything, because the more that you do that, the more people see what we're doing. Share it with a friend, share it with another Calligra bestie or another artist that you might know, because we're here for you, and we also want to be here for everyone else too, and help and support the community.
I think that's it for today. Thanks for keeping up. Bye, everybody.
Bye.